So Christmas Duck. Christmas Duck is a fan favorite. He's kind of a mascot, I guess, and I think that's partly because it's a weird concept, a Christmas duck, and partly because it's like the first unique thing that you encounter in the game. It's kind of personified. He's like a little character. But the thing is, Christmas Duck was not planned. When we were starting the project, we didn't have a 3D modeler because Kate came on a couple months after we started, and we needed a bunch of 3D models. And so I was just going through the Unity asset store. So I was going through the list and saw this Christmas duck, and I was like, "What is?" Okay, and I grabbed it, and we used it as like a test object just to set up the system where you can grab stuff and carry it around. And then I ended up saying, all right, we got this Christmas duck, I'll hide the key under it. And instead of replacing the free model with a totally different thing, just made a real version of it. And Carla modeled it, and Kate textured it, and we kept him in the game. And we're glad, because he's everybody's little friend. Good old Christmas duck. Hi, I'm Steve Gaynor. I'm the co-founder of the Fulbright company. We made Gone Home. I was the writer and designer, and thank you for taking a look at our commentary mode. Whenever you find an icon like the one you just clicked on, you can find out a little bit more about the game. I want to thank everybody who's added commentary, Janman and Carla, my co-founders of the company, Kate Craig, our 3D artist, Chris Remo, our composer, Sarah Grayson, the voice of Sam Greenbrier, and Corin Tucker, the lead singer of Heavens to Betsy and Slater Kinney and other awesome bands. So thank you.
Dear Katie, so much has changed, even just since you've been away. We moved into this house. I'm at a new school. And my big sister being gone for a year doesn't make it any easier. It doesn't feel real. But I'm not gonna let it faze me. I used to tell you everything, and if I can't do it in person, because you're off gallivanting around who knows where, I'll tell it to this journal. Just like I was talking to you.
Yeah, the biggest purpose of the card was, to say, oh, Sam is 17, if you look for this thing. But there's so much, we need so much handwriting in the game, especially for like one-off characters that you don't see their handwriting more than once. And we knew we needed a birthday card from some member of Sam's more extended family that you were never going to hear from again. And so I was like, okay, it could be her uncle. And as an Easter egg, kind of like wink and nod thing, like we're fans of, the Looking Glass legacy of games and Deus Ex and Dishonored. And so I got in contact with Harvey Smith, who is the lead designer of Deus Ex and the co-creative lead of Dishonored, and asked if he would just write on a piece of paper, "Happy Birthday, Sam," from Uncle Harvey. And he just took a picture with his cell phone. And
like 5 minutes after you asked him. It was amazing. He was just like, yes, I will do this immediately.
Yeah.
It was the best.
I think, he took a picture with his cell phone, and it was really cool. Harvey's a great guy, and I love his games, and we're, super honored to have his signature in the hub of the Greenbrier house.
Hell yeah.
Hello, my name is Kate Craig, and I was creating a lot of the environment assets for the game. Not all of them, some of them I had help with, which I'll touch on a little later, but most of the stuff like the walls and the floors, some of the larger pieces of furniture were my doing, and I'm going to be talking about some of the environmental storytelling aspects in Gone Home. I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't mention the work that my wife, Emily Carroll, did on the project. She did the house title image that we've used for our wallpapers and for the start screen of the game. She did the loading cassette tape, and she did the maps in the house. And actually, Carla made a font out of her handwriting because we wanted something that was just a little bit spooky, maybe a little ominous, but something that sort of suited the tone of the game. And I was really glad to be working with her, and I was really glad that the other guys were too. We had a really good time. and people have responded quite positively to her title screen, which is something that I really appreciate. I know she does too.
Oh man, mom handwriting. We went through a lot of different moms for handwriting. A lot of different moms contributed handwriting for a game. At first, let's see, how did we do? What were we doing first? I think I just did it and it wasn't great. And then we had Emily do it, but her handwriting was used so heavily in other parts of the game that we had to find someone else. And I think we actually had Yanaman try to do it for a while before he was Dad's handwriting. And then we got Yanaman's mom, and she was ideal for it. Really good mom handwriting. Yeah.
The Goodfellow High School jacket and the logo generally is a reference to the logo for Minerva's Den, the section of Rapture that DLC takes place in, that we worked on together. But we didn't want to make it look exactly like the owl logo from that game. We wanted it to be, an homage or a reference or whatever.
Yeah, so we decided that since this is a Pacific Northwest school and town and setting, that we would go for some native style representation. And let's see.
Well, actually, we were struggling with it for a little while because we wanted. At first, I was saying, just make it look like a very 90s looking school mascot logo illustration that's just cheap, that maybe one of the students did or something, and the direction wasn't good enough and we didn't really have a good enough example to work from. And then Kate actually came to visit.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And she suggested, what if it's like a Pacific Northwest Native American style approach, and that really just clicked and made total sense. This is where you find the first half of Sam's Locker, or I guess it's actually the second half of Sam's Locker combo as far as what the piece of paper is. But at first, there were the locker combination sheet was torn into 3 pieces, so you had 1 digit on each of them, and it was actually right before we sent out our IGF build to the judges. It was the night before, and Carla came down to the basement and she was like, at 3 o'clock in the morning last night, I woke up in bed just being like, oh, we can't have it in 3 pieces, that's way too gamey. Well, that's bad, we have to fix that. And
I forgot about that.
And you were absolutely right. And you've had a couple of those being woken up by us making a bad decision kind of moments over the course of the development, and they were always important changes that needed to be made.
Hi, I'm Chris Remo, the composer on Gone Home. In my commentary tracks, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what went into creating the original music soundtrack for the game. Gone Home is an unusual game, musically speaking, in that it consists of 2 distinct music soundtracks. The one of those probably more frequently commented on is the collection of licensed Riot Girl songs that the player finds in Sam's cassette tapes strewn around the house. The other one is the original music that accompanies the player's undirected exploration of the house and underscores almost every one of Sam's audio diary recordings. When Steve first asked me to do music for Gone Home, I was really excited about it, but there are almost no parameters for what that meant in terms of format or scope. Having played an early build of the game, I started by just doing a few musical sketches with no real regard for length or usage, mainly consisting of vintage electric piano sounds like Wurlitzers and Fender Rhodes. I chose those instruments because I wanted sounds that would feel at home in the era of the game. The Twin Peaks soundtrack used a lot of Rhodes, for example, but would also blend into the...
Hi, this is Corin Tucker from Heavens to Betsy. And Heavens to Betsy was a band that formed in 1991, actually. And I actually got the idea for joining a band when I moved to Olympia, Washington, and became a fan of the music scene there. And it seemed like everyone was in a band. So I decided I was going to start a band too. But I didn't actually start the band until I went home after the first year of college. I went back to Eugene, Oregon, and my high school friend Tracy Sawyer and I started playing music together, and that was the beginning of Heavens to Betsy. So I had told, with my big mouth, I had told all my friends that I was going to start a band. And the summer of, I think it was 1991, my friend Michelle Noel booked the International Pop Underground in Olympia, Washington. And she helped organize a night at the convention called Girl Night. And it was all women musicians. So she called me and said, hey, let's get you on stage with that, you want to play the show that I'm organizing. This totally new band that had never performed before. I mean, we had never performed ever any kind of music. Got invited to play this big show at the Capitol Theater in Olympia in front of all of our musical heroes, right? Everyone from K Records, all of Fugazi was there, all of Bikini Kill was there. This music that I was a huge fan of suddenly. That was our very first show, the very first Heavens to Betsy show. And we were terrified, but we did it, and people loved it, and it was, it changed my life forever that night.
So here's one of Dad's pulpy JFK books. He's now moved on from primary sources to theories about how JFK was killed. However, this one purports to contain the truth. The publishing company is a doofy inside joke because, there's Harcourt Brace, the publisher that exists, and so I was trying to think of a good name for a publisher, and being a big nerd, I immediately thought of Harcourt Fenton Mudd and how he basically sounds like a publishing company, so...
You have to say who that is.
No! Alright, fine. He's an awful character from
Star Trek.
Original Star Trek, which is called Mudd's Women, and also there's another one whose name an episode I can't remember for some reason.
I'm Mudd.
Fuck, yes, okay. Thank you.
It's a Star Trek reference. You did it, Carla.
What?
The doors were actually one of the hardest things in the game to get working correctly, and I know that there's still some bugs existing with the doors, actually. But it's a surprisingly hard problem, which is why most video games just have doors that kind of slide away into nothingness or open in strange ways or don't, let you interact fully with doors. But of course, it's in a house like in Gone Home, a realistic house. It's important that everything be as natural as possible. The one concession we made to video gaminess is that the doors all swing both ways, which never happens in a real house, but it's necessary to prevent the player trapping themselves in some strange state.
Here we have Fresh Magazine, which is a synthesis and pastiche of Sassy Magazine, which if you haven't looked at it, or if it wasn't, something that you cared about in the early 90s, it was very feminist and, strongly individualist and actually gave good advice. It was actually really good. Anyway, so yeah, this is the type treatment. The super grungy type treatment is totally indicative. That's how it used to be. Oh yeah, and amusingly, of course, our cover model is Rachel, Steve's wife. I had to make her put on this awful light pink lipstick and do the 90s-ist stuff imaginable. And she did it.
It was your idea to put a braid in the front of her bangs?
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like... Congratulations.
Oh, thanks.
Inside of this file folder, you find the first combination code in the game. This code goes to Dad's locked filing cabinet, and it's 0451, which is a bit of a tradition / in-joke amongst. I mean, it's not really an in-joke. It's just an internal reference amongst this lineage of games that hark back to immersive sims that are kind of first-person exploration games that started with Ultima Underworld and System Shock, and 451 was the first key code in System Shock, and then it was also the first key code in System Shock 2 and Deus Ex and BioShock and most recently Dishonored. And yeah, I've personally worked on a couple of games that had 0451 as the first code in them, and we were really adherent to the tenets of the interactive model and kind of the principles of design behind those games when we were designing how Gone Home works. And so to maintain that tradition, we also made it the first code in our game.
And you made it the tattoo on your arm.
I also got a tattoo of 0451 because it is sort of a symbol of this certain philosophy of game design that's important to me. And yeah, this writing, Breaking Canon, is in Emily's handwriting. Emily's handwriting is technically only in the font that exists outside the game. She doesn't actually do the handwriting in any of the characters, but yeah, I had her write 0451. So there's a lot less density in the house than there would be in a real house. Like, if you look around your house, there's just junk piled everywhere, probably.
Maybe
like,
it's just our house.
I think it's most house.
Oh, you're right.
But, so, you know, our strategy was you either fully invest in something and, you know, put, like, a plausible representation of this aspect of a room in, or you just don't put it in at all. And the player will fill in the gaps between, like, oh, these are all the things that represent the kind of room I'm supposed to be in, and it doesn't jump out at me that there's no toilet plungers in the bathroom or whatever. But the biggest instance of this that I think actually totally worked, because no one has ever called it out, is, surprise, think about it, there are no shoes in this house. Ta-da!
Where's your brain now?
and I don't think anybody's noticed it, and I think it's because if we had put one pair of shoes or two pairs of shoes, people would have said, where are all the rest of the shoes?
Right.
But really, to have a plausible house, Mom would have to have 10 pairs of shoes and her work boots, and Dad would need to have some tennis shoes and some work shoes and so on and so forth. So we just said, there aren't going to be any shoes, and we hope nobody notices.
Another board game. This one wasn't done by me, though. This one was done by Carla. But I really like it because the ghost figures on the back of the game are actually long-deceased family members of mine. When I was home at Christmas, I was digging through my family's basement, sort of getting an idea of what a basement has in it, just sort of for set dressing purposes. And while I was down there, I found a big box that my family actually hadn't seen. We got a big box of things from my grandmother after she passed away. And inside this box was all these tintypes, love letters and sort of emigration papers and notes from as far back as the 1850s when my family had emigrated from Scotland and Ireland. And I asked my family if it was possible that I include these in some sort of artistic project, and they said sure. They gave me their blessing. And I scanned them, and I didn't know if they were actually going to make it in the game, but then I saw that Carla had made this game, and really liked that they showed up as ghosts on the back of it. And it's sort of, I think, a nod for idle thumbs listeners who really feel quite passionately about ghosts, as it turns out. Surprise!
one of my favorite things that came out during development is someone wrote an email mistakenly referring to mittens, and Steve replied in the voice of Katie, saying, "It's just Mitten. She's only one cat, Mom."
The life cycle of the condom.
That's not a real thing, Steve.
The life cycle of the condom.
All right.
By Carla Zamanja.
Is as follows. Initially, the condom was a separate plot point. It was an actual plot point. We gave it to Lonnie, and we had Sam find it in Lonnie's purse, and it made Sam worried about what the hell she was doing with it, etc. And that was sort of a wedge to drive them apart when that was the storyline, which it no longer is. And because we decided we hated it. But I had already made the condom asset, which I'm actually really proud of. I really like that condom. It's really good. Also, I think Nero is a really good brand for condoms. Anyway.
Yeah, it's a play on Trojan and everything, but
yeah,
it works.
But it's, it's the whole, notably decadent,
Right,
it's like,
yeah.
Anyway, I like it.
Yeah.
I'm proud of this thing.
And the
so...
the specular on it looks really nice.
It does look good. I don't know. So we had this, extra asset lying around, and and we were like, we were all, oh, it's a shame that it's going to waste, but whatever. Sometimes things don't get used. And then we remembered the horror of digging around in your parents' drawers and finding their condoms and stuff, and being just utterly fucking horrified. And we decided we would give that to you, the player.
So earlier in an earlier version of the story in Gone Home, Sam and Lonnie got caught together, and Lonnie's dad was like an asshole about it and threatened to send Lonnie to live with her mom in Florida. And we cut that. It was too melodramatic and it wasn't really interesting. It was an external force that was acting on them, which I wasn't super excited about in practice, and so on and so forth. But it caused there to be this concept of Lonnie's mom living in Florida, which
Florida is, of course, the worst place that you can live.
Well, let's not assume. But that said, it's the other side of the country, and it's totally so foreign from Oregon and everything. Also, it's where I grew up.
Yeah, that was.
So
I was kidding you.
So yes, the reason I think that Lonnie's mom lives in Florida is that I grew up in Florida, and I moved from Florida to Oregon when I was 19, and I've been back to visit, but if someone were to say to me, "Hey Steve, do you want to go back and live in Florida?" I would take a sheet of notebook paper and I would write "no" on it, as big as you can get, and
With
hand it back to
gravestones.
you. There would be knives, there would be
Yeah.
gravestones, there would be
Dead
lightning,
face. Yeah.
big X's in the
Yeah.
eyes, vampire teeth for some reason.
I was largely unfamiliar with Florida, and my family started going there every once in a while, or when I was in high school for Christmas, because my mom hates being cold. And
Pick the wrong goddamn place to live,
I
Mrs.
know.
Zamanja.
Yeah, well, but anyway, the only thing that I remember basically is that everybody had lawn flamingos, and we went around Christmas, so I remember hearing on the radio multiple times dogs barking Christmas carols. That's Florida.
Florida sounds cooler than I remember it being.
In my head, that's Florida, right there.
The fact that there are speedruns for our game makes me really happy, and the fact that, that the any percent speedrun, aka you don't have to pick up anything, just get to the end as fast as possible, has basically been optimized to, I think, 47 or 48 seconds. Even just watching that speedrun is really fun because you see the player optimize. For instance, the fastest speedruns, they don't turn on any lights because it would take a fraction of a second to turn towards the light switch and turn it on and then turn back to the direction that they wanted to go. And they just kind of strafe past things and don't even change direction. to move through the house. And then the 100% Diaries speedrun is even more interesting because players use that secret knowledge to play the game totally out of order based on a strategy for, okay, what's the most efficient way to go to these 24 points in the game.
Like spatially, so it's like this visit, it's the salesman, problem or something, where it has to go.
The sunset light in this house is the saddest thing I've ever seen. I just want to sleep.
All of the sliding doors that you see in the game are actually, from a code perspective, drawers. When I made a thing that could slide along a track like that for the purpose of making drawers, Steve took it and, as designers are wont to do, used it for his own purposes and came up with sliding doors in our game.
It's really about the ideals that we were trying to...
Writing Sam was a unique challenge, just in the sense of, on the one hand, it was very much from my personal experience because it's about being a teenager and my memories from that time, as an individual, but also who Sam was and what her experience was came about as a result of kind of problem solving that we were doing, that Carla and I were doing, just figuring out what the story and what the conflict in the story was going to be. So, by the time we figured out this was all going to take place in one house, and the conflict was going to be between the members of this family, and it had to be kind of irreconcilable differences that would cause serious drama between the members of this family, we started thinking, what form could that take? Could it be that the teenager of the family falls in love with somebody that they're not supposed to and the parents don't agree? And what is the contemporary version of that? And so, we at some point decided that we were going to write Sam as a gay character who had fallen in love with another girl, and what conflict would that cause within the family, right?
And we were excited about that opportunity just because of the paucity of that kind of narrative in games. And I remember when we came up with that concept, just being like, oh man, this is gonna be good, we actually get to do this, which is really cool. But anyway, we actually we had to do a lot of work to make it plausible.
Right. Well, because the other side of it is that I'm the writer on the game, and on the one hand, a lot of teenage experience is universal, but I also at some point just had that very clear realization of, okay, I have just signed up for writing a gay teenage girl. Two out of the three aspects of that character are not something that I've actually lived through, and so it was impressed upon me, especially like when I was working at Irrational, how important research was to getting your fiction right, whether it's very practical terms like how something works mechanically, to what the characterization of the individuals in your story might be. And so my process was reading a lot of blogs about people's actual experiences growing up being gay and being female, and reading fiction and nonfiction about people's experience, and doing original interviews with people that I knew in my life, and asking them about what they remember about growing up with these experiences, and being able to actually, ask follow-up questions. And I'm really grateful to all the people who have shared their experiences through writing and who were willing to share their experiences with me, personally, talking to me into a microphone so that I could refer to it later, which is just a huge leap for someone to take, to talk about their own, coming of age and all of those very personal experiences. But, I couldn't have gone into writing this character with just saying, well, I'll just assume that I'll do an okay job and write it however it seems like I should, and instead saying you have to take this seriously and you have to actually reach out to people who have lived it, so that when you're writing this character, it represents the experience of people like her in a way that is plausible and respectful and
Authentic.
yeah, that represents them in a way that doesn't cheapen the experience they've had by relying on cliches or just kind of your expectations as an outsider.
So I'm Sarah Argadale. This is my salad dressing, named for my experience with being in Russia and that being what everyone knows me for. I studied Russian in college and I lived there for about a year teaching English when I finished school, and it was a cool thing that happened in my life. So I am a reader of the Idle Thumbs podcast, and I guess that's how I met everyone.
When you put out any sort of content about your game online, whether it's screenshots or whether it's gameplay or anything along those lines, you're sort of at the mercy of the internet, and you sort of want to see what people are going to respond to, whether it's positive or negative. Hopefully it's positive. But we put out the screenshot a while back of the TV room, among other screenshots, and there's lots of wonderful comments, and I was really happy about that. But one of the comments that I saw a couple of times was people talking about how greasy this pizza box was. Something I hadn't noticed, so I went back and I checked it. It's a very greasy pizza box. Maybe Sam's into deep dish pizza, who knows. But
for a long time, the kitchen was not going to be mid-renovation the way that it is. And it's one of those things that I think that necessity, a production constraint, actually made this part of the house better than it would have been if we could have just done what it.
Lonnie had her going away show with her band tonight. She's so incredible on stage.
So that was probably the hardest one we had to record. It was part of the second batch of recording we did. And so I had the script a few days before we did the recording to kind of read through it all and get a feel for where the story was going. And then we'd met for lunch to go over everything and see if I had any questions before we went into the studio. And I just right away admitted, yep, some part of this script here, I'll be honest, one of these totally had me crying, straight up, totally couldn't help it. Figuring I had my cry out, it was good, I'll be fine, get to the recording, it'll be great, get it out of your system. And as soon as I read the first word, I was like, no, oh God, I'm gonna start crying again, it's gonna be great. I'm hey, I'm a professional voice actress in the studio, I'm going to totally bawl all over your lines, and it's going to sound ridiculous and terrible, and we're going to have to do the take again, and it's going to sound even worse because now I'm crying. So it actually ended up being one take. Really, it's cathartic in a way for me, I think, because it's really, how do I put it? It's really me talking to specific people. I knew it was going to happen again. I knew it. It's the stupid writing being so on point. Which is definite praise for the character build-up at this point, because I just become so connected with her and making those parallels all the way along. And then you get to this point where it's I know exactly how you feel. I know exactly what you're going through. It was completely authentic. I've enjoyed people commenting on the connection they've had to the emotion that's in the character. And this is always the diary I think of, because it's the one that it most got me.
I'd already played through the first full half of Gone Home before I started composing any music, which was really important to understand how the game felt and played and looked. But I didn't get a build of the complete game until I'd already been delivered the Part 2 audio logs, and then ended up not playing any of the second half of the game until it was fully complete and I'd written all the music. This wasn't originally my intention, but it meant I ended up fully immersed in Sam's story, essentially to the exclusion of all the other subplots of the game, which are not accompanied by specific music. I don't know if that was objectively the right call or not as the composer, but it definitely made me feel very connected to that character. I've probably heard Sarah delivering Sam's story dozens or maybe hundreds of times.
We didn't really give Kate very specific direction for this. She gave us some
We agreed our last night together would be our happiest ever. And we'd forget.
We didn't really give Kate very specific direction for this. She gave us some reference for us to approve and everything, but when we put it into the game, again, not a request from us at all, looking at the struts and the shape of the windows and how it's this sort of deco metal structure with water outside of it, I was just like, welcome to Rapture.
Oh, I know, it's so true.
It almost feels
really
like an intentional reference, if only it were intentional. So you want to talk about this fucking jazz mug?
Nobody wants to talk about the jazz mug.
Well,
it's
except
the
for
worst.
Carla.
I hate it. It's the worst.
that was such a common theme
Yeah.
when we were like approving assets or making stuff visually for Gone Home. Is just like, oh my god, that's hideous. I fucking hate it. We're putting it in the game.
Yeah,
because
there's
like
so
just
much
like
of that.
awful '90s furniture and like the
we see it in a secondhand store or like
or you
just
see
on
it
the
in the
internet.
Sears catalog we
Yeah.
bought. And it's just like there's so
just
many
feel like,
fucking
oh,
ruffles on it. I want to puke. Like the wicker furniture in
Yeah.
Mom and Dad's room.
Right.
It's like that's fucking hideous.
We need it.
Definitely the second half was where a lot more of the emotional weight in the character came out, and that was a lot to handle, but a lot of fun to do too, because I've really not gotten to do a character that actually was so, I guess, emotionally real and so human. You know, it's sort of, you're not doing some commercial selling you thing or not doing some sort of sci-fi fantasy world sort of story. It was very realistic and very relatable, and you sort of realize that the character's someone that you could know or that you could have been, you know, when you were younger, which I really liked. It was very exciting. The whole experience has been really good.
We never really discussed the idea of individually scoring each audio log ahead of time. I just got an email one day from Steve after they had done the first round of voice recording with Sarah Grayson, who did an amazing job as Sam. And he said he'd been thinking about the idea of giving each log a piece of music to ground it in the proper tone.
Around here, you will find some of Sam's Super Nintendo cartridges that she left behind. Obviously, for legal reasons, we couldn't put real games in, and so we conscripted a few of our friends in the industry who are really talented artists to make cool label art for fake Nintendo games that we came up with.
It's so true. The first one was Super Spitfire, and that was by Rachel Morris, who is a cool artist. What is it? The NYU?
The NYU Game Center. She's done a bunch of like posters and other art for them.
And then the next one was Adventures to Cat Returns, which is it's sort of a.
It's a mascot platformer. It's a Bubsy-esque dude having cat.
Oh yeah, but it's a regular cat. It's not a bald cat.
Yeah, it's a regular cat that rides a motorcycle towards an explosion.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lee Petty is the art director at Double.
Yeah, I ended up being pretty happy with this. This is the only picture of Bonnie that we had for a really long time, and I was really glad to actually come up with something that we liked, since this kind of thing is really hard, especially when it is such a major